Hello and welcome to the Road to Autonomy. The Road to Autonomy is brought to you in part by Stantec Generation AV. Stantec Generation AV combines some of the most experienced AV experts in the industry with the resources of a global engineering firm. Stantec Generation AV provides education, consulting, assessment, and guidance to any industry interested in autonomous vehicles. Learn more at stantec.com. Hello and welcome to the Road to Autonomy. I'm your host, Grayson Brulte. On today's episode, we're absolutely honored to have Andrew Culhane, Chief Strategy Officer, Torc Robotics. Welcome to the podcast, Andrew.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you here because if you bought it, a truck brought it. Trucks play a vital role in the U.S. economy, so I can't wait to dive into this conversation.
It's an absolutely exciting place to be, and really that realization as this is actually Truck Driver Appreciation Week, and all the great things that we think autonomy can do for the freight and the supply chain industry and really help out adding some of that needed capacity.
Thank you for saying that. For the individuals that are truck drivers, thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for going to work during the depths of COVID, because if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't have food, we wouldn't have toilet paper, and the economy would have came to a standstill. So thank you for going out there in the front lines and delivering the goods. And to the listeners, if you want to see a really great graphic, go on Torc's Twitter page. They made a really great graphic thanking the drivers. Andrew, you've been at Torc 14 years. I repeat, 14 years. This is incredible. Longer than I was in high school. You originally joined as a sales engineer. You're now Chief Strategy Officer. Reflect on the last 14 years. It's one heck of a run.
Yeah, no, it's been an amazing journey. I started as sales engineer because when you're 8 people and mostly a bunch of buddies coming out of grad school, somebody has to talk to customers and try to figure out how to pay the bills. So I was fortunate enough to be the one who could talk and stopped writing code and stopped being involved on the technology development side. And in the early days, for those that don't know, Torc was bootstrapped from day one. So we had no outside capital into Torc until the Daimler deal. And so from those early days, it was all about finding the right partners, the right opportunities. One of the things that we did over that course of time was manage to grow every year and be profitable every year, despite bootstrapping it through a recession, government sequestration. And so from those early years, it was really figure out what to do with this cool technology. I've said it over and over again, and I still mean it. I think that original 10 to 15 of us, we would have been successful at anything. And this goes all the way to Michael Fleming, folks like Ben Hastings, Micah Vidable, and others from those early days. We just all happened to really love self-driving. But I truly believe that group had the drive and the commitment to succeed at anything. We've just been fortunate enough to be on this path for the last 14, 15 years. So in those days, it was finding those critical partners, whether it was coming out of the DARPA challenge and getting a partner like Caterpillar, or some of the work we got to do, on the counter IED and saving lives side with the military. And so those early days really kind of formed up who we were as a company. We were a company where we talked before the show here. We're a company that didn't pound our chest and talk publicly as much as we probably should have about all the amazing things that were being done. Really, we focused on making sure our customers were happy, right? Making sure that we were able to get systems deployed into Afghanistan that were able to save lives, or mining technology out in the field with Caterpillar. And really that continued through the scale up. There was no change in that recipe. We added some more great folks to the team. We added some new amazing customers and partners, but the kind of core of that company never changed. It was mostly the same leadership, but then really adding in a few different areas within the DoD side, a few different opportunities with building and construction products with Caterpillar, ultimately leading us to mobility services and trucking. So we had a partnership with Transdev, a great group that does a lot of mobility services work. We were looking at all this and figuring out, what is that great application? What is that thing that's going to allow us to really achieve our mission of saving lives, make major impacts, and get to scale while having 15 years of experience to understand where things in terms of a complexity or regulatory or a business case cause autonomy to start to break down from one of those avenues. And so that kind of brought us to trucking, which is where we are today. So it's been an amazing journey. I don't know that I would do it again. I'm a little older now than I was when I started this, but I would not trade any of the last almost 15 years for anything.
Torc took a similar road to what Bobby Hambrick did with autonomous stuff before they were acquired to Hexagon. Bobby sold his real estate holdings, put all his personal capital into autonomous stuff, took no outside capital, and very similar to Torc, profitable. Bobby's whole philosophy was, we are going to be profitable. I am not going to take outside capital. I'm going to pay my employees well, and we're going to grow this company. They did really well with the successful exit that they did to Hexagon. And in my opinion, you did very well with the Daimler truck majority investment. You're getting access to world-class trucks. You're getting access to world-class engineering teams. And now you're all in on trucking. As we know that the industry has gone, I call it the great pivot to trucking. So very similar to Torc, everybody did vehicles, and then they pivoted to trucking. Over those 14 years, is your bootstrapping, building the business, understanding profitability, the ups and downs of markets and economics. What were some of the biggest challenges that you witnessed firsthand? And was it having enough money to pay the utility bill to keep the lights on?
It went all across the board. And I'd love to tell you, it was just, you solve this one thing and everything's great. There were years where it was, are we paying our lease? Are we paying employees next week, next month? That early group made a lot of sacrifices to get us through some of those tough times. As we kind of continued, and you said everybody pivoted to trucking, I'll make a shout out to some of the Torkers of that time. Was we were the first to make that pivot to trucking, and actually had the first autonomy OE partnership with Daimler a year before anybody else. I'd like to think we had learned a lot of lessons over all those years and really understanding what it was going to take, and kind of made that move to trucking before anybody else. You asked about some of those other lessons. I think the other lessons came from understanding customers matter more than just technology. You mentioned joining Daimler and having access to world-class trucks, world-class engineers. We actually have access to world-class customers and partners too, right? You've seen announcements with folks like Penske and Schneider and others on our advisory council. That's worth every bit as much as the engineering and the trucks themselves, is understanding what is this product? How is it going to fit, right? Because just driving a truck down the road isn't all you have to do. And so how do we make sure we're developing this right product that fits the true needs in the market, leverages the drivers that we have today, really provides a meaningful addition, and is not trying to come and disrupt, right? I hate that word, disrupt the supply chain. It's disrupted today, right? We're seeing that. We want to help, really provide some sustained level of innovation, of new technology that fits one piece of that application and doesn't try to solve everything.
Did Daimler help you understanding the value of brands and storytelling? Daimler, before they were split into two companies, you had the passenger car with Mercedes-Benz, then you had Daimler Truck, but they always did a really great job in the marketplace of telling those stories and putting a premium around their brand.
Absolutely. And, I had the pleasure, obviously, of meeting Martin Daum on the Daimler Truck side, John O'Leary, the current CEO of Trucks North America, Roger Nielsen before that. You can look up any of their public presentations. I am always thoroughly impressed with their ability to communicate not some technical specification, right? And not this one little nugget here, but the broader understanding of what that product, right? What does a truck like the Cascadia really mean to the long haul market, right? And what are these big benefits? And it's just been amazing to learn from that, and something that we as Torc feel very fortunate to be able to build our brand, although independent, with that partnership in mind.
Looking at the partnership, I started reading some of the public filings around Daimler Truck, looking at the earnings transfer from earnings calls. They talk about Torc in a very positive manner. Their brand is lifting your brand, and this is a very big positive for you.
And I hope it goes both ways, right? Because we do interact with those key customers, and we want to be that trusted partner, that group. Again, look at our background, right? We would go out into the mines with Caterpillar and hear from the people operating those mines and talk to the truck drivers. We spent weeks and months out in the field with the Marine Corps, with the Air Force, sleeping in cots and learning how they really need to solve a problem. Really, we hope that we can just build on that, bring those experiences to the autonomous trucking market as well.
Those are tough experiences. Those are experiences that you have to have because you have to understand the environment of where your vehicles are going to operate. You have to understand the personalities, the idiosyncrasies of those individuals that are going to be using your technology. And you have a culture of Torc. You've been there a long time. When the decision was made to pivot from passenger vehicles to trucks, was that a hard one that the group had to come together and say, this is the best path forward for us?
Yeah, it was interesting, and it wasn't just getting away from the passenger cars and mobility services, but it was also the mining and the military businesses. Looking at the decisions we made, they were never easy, right? Those were businesses that we had spent, more than a decade building and growing. But when we really looked at it, we said, what is our mission, right? We want to get out there and save lives. What gives us the best opportunity? And it was twofold. It was one, there's this amazing opportunity through, self-driving trucks, right? You talked about, truck driver appreciation and being able to get goods where they need to be. There is still needed capacity. There will still be continued needed capacity, especially on that long haul middle mile. And we see that continuing to expand today in an area we think we can really provide that value through self-driving trucking. The other aspect is focus. Talent is at a premium in this industry. As you know, being able to focus every single person at Torc on this most critical aspect of the business that was self-driving was really important to us. We wanted to make sure, and we did right by all of our partners along the way, but really began to focus everybody on self-driving trucking and really kind of continuing to stay laser focused and only focused on North America even, compared to some others. We don't want to spread our focus. We want to stay laser focused on the problems we have here.
It's a very smart move. There is a need for capacity. There's a pending rail strike, which could bring the U.S. economy to a grinding halt, and that cargo and freight will go on trucks. And if you look at, there's not enough truck drivers today. Individuals are buying more goods than ever. The autonomous trucks can help shore up the supply chain. And then you look at the middle mile, which is the long part. It's very hard on the driver. You can automate that. That becomes a big positive benefit. And Torc is working on the hub-to-hub model. Why did you do the hub-to-hub model approach?
Yeah, we'll chalk this up to a lot of years of learning, right, of where self-driving technology shines and where it struggles. We look at the opportunity, the more repeatable routes, the longer miles on interstates, which are more structured. Again, you don't get rid of all of the challenges of other humans on the road, but they're more structured than a downtown city environment. So we saw that as a really great opportunity to deliver a meaningful product. And again, hub to hub is not one point to one point only, but really a way to kind of structure that operational design domain, that product requirement, and really provide meaningful value without trying to boil the ocean. One of the stats I like to look at is interstates make up 1.2% of the overall road networks in the US. If you had automated trucks on not even half of those, so we'll call it 0.5% of the roads in North America, you can provide significant, meaningful value to this industry. That's why we want to keep that focus.
Well, you provide industry to the value. I remember finally as a kid, we'd play the honk game and we see the truck and we raise the arm. At some point in the future, will your trucks be able to play the honk game?
I think we have to, right? We always have to. It's funny, you talk about things like that. One of the things I think we're super proud of, and again, I'll say Truck Driver Appreciation Week over and over because I think it's so important. Our drivers are a critical part of how we actually develop the software, and not just the things you think of, oh, well, this is how I do a lane change. All these little idiosyncrasies of driving an 80,000-pound truck down the road, right? The courtesy behaviors, giving a little extra room in a lane, making your intent really clear that you're giving somebody space to merge in, and then all the way down to hopefully eventually honking the horn, right? We want to learn from those drivers. They're the experts. We're just putting the software in place to drive as well as they do when they're going down the road.
Is that building on the approach where you worked with the DoD, putting the vehicles into theater, where you understood the elements of theater? Are you going around and meeting with truck drivers, going to truck stops, going to weigh stations, kind of understanding the entire domain where you can be operating?
Yeah, so we have two great avenues for that. Obviously, the first is our own drivers. So we have a test fleet out in Albuquerque, and the folks we have out there, we have trucks here in Blacksburg, we have closed course testing. They are world class. If you ever get the opportunity to come out to Albuquerque and get in one of those vehicles, you'll meet those truckers, and every single one of them has an amazing background and can give us insight every single time they go down the road, and they do. Beyond that, again, we have the advisory council where we can go up to Green Bay and sit with the folks at Schneider and learn from their operations. Hey, you didn't know this about dispatch, but let me tell you the phone calls you're going to get at 2 a.m., right? And all these other things. So we can learn from not only our drivers, but the industry at large, and something that we really, really value here at Torc.
Are one of the benefits testing in Albuquerque the wind, since there's the really weird wind patterns, and that's why you have the balloon festival there?
So there's even more than that. We look at Albuquerque as a really feature-rich testing environment. So you have I-40 and I-25, but if you basically drive anywhere east, west, and south, you pick up something interesting when you're driving. When you leave Albuquerque to the east, you immediately climb up the mountains. So you climb Sandia Mountains, and really get some elevation. Well, when you think about trucking, driving on 2 lanes straight and boring doesn't really exercise the system. When you're driving with high speed differential going uphill, now you have a whole different challenging set of dynamics going up that hill. It's more interesting coming downhill. You talked about the access to an amazing truck chassis with the Cascadia and world-class engineering. The amount of control you need to bring a fully loaded truck down I-40 in that stretch is amazing. And that doesn't happen without a close autonomy OEM partnership, all the way down to how we control the engine brakes, how do we tie into that vehicle. And professional truck drivers ride in the vehicle, and they're generally amazed because if they were driving down that hill, they're going to overspeed and underspeed by a few miles an hour each way. Our truck's generally within 0.2, 0.3 miles an hour, and that's dealing with the lateral shifts because of the wind and all these other interesting variables. And so that's a good example of Albuquerque providing that not only urban and downtown highway driving, but also the geography as well. And they get snow there too, it turns out.
If you look at, so going from downtown Albuquerque, I had the Neil Young song on. I'm driving out to Santa Fe. I don't want to use the term rolling hills, but it's very similar where I could not see the vehicle in front of me because the way that the highway was designed at certain points. Is that another testing element that goes into your system? Okay, we not necessarily can see the vehicle, but there's a pretty, let's just say 80%, 90% chance that there is a vehicle there.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, interstates do have set requirements on things like grade and curvature and all of that. So when we're designing these systems, we're looking at all of those to figure out what are those unique challenges. Do we need to have speed restrictions in certain areas? And truck drivers do that today. A well-trained truck driver, when they have to turn their windshield wipers on to a certain speed, that cues them in that they need to slow down to 5 miles, 10 miles an hour under the speed limit. So there are some other things out there. Again, we talk about learning from those best drivers that we have. They give that insight. Hey, look, if I had to click my windshield wipers on this much, I'm automatically going to slow down 5 or 10 miles an hour. Or when I can't have clear line of sight over a hill, I'm going to check up and kind of approach that a bit more cautiously. And those are things that we build into the system and our design requirements to make sure we're really thinking about this problem and taking advantage of some of the things we have as an autonomous truck too, right? We never have to be in a hurry. People that ride in the truck laugh. They're like, this is the most courteous driver. This is the most boring, courteous driver I've ridden with. It's like, yeah, because it doesn't have to be in a hurry, right? If it needs to slow down, if it needs to let you merge in to be safer, why not do it? So there's those things that we can build in as we operate in those environments.
Have you tested in the snow in Albuquerque yet?
So we'll do data collection with very set restrictions. We always want to ensure that safety is first for any and all testing we do. So underfoot conditions matter. So we've had benefit being here in Virginia as well over the years. We've done lots of data collection in adverse weather over the years and start to understand how different sensors would work. And even for things like heavy rain, we have closed course testing opportunities to grab that data and do it safely.
When the day that Torc announces that you've driven from Albuquerque to Taos in the winter, we'll know that you're rocking and rolling in snow because Taos gets a lot of snow.
Yeah. Oh, trust me, a lot of our crew down there in Albuquerque, every time I get out there, reminds me of the mountains they have around them. So winter will be here soon enough.
It's a beautiful part of the country. You mentioned the close partnership with Daimler Truck. I believe the same thing, and a lot of folks do, that the winners of this will be a closely integrated partnership between an autonomous vehicle developer and an OEM where it's fully integrated and you're getting engineering support and you're working together. It's been 3 years since Daimler Truck took a majority stake in Torc. How did that transaction first come to fruition, and how are you integrating your technology to build the world's best self-driving truck?
Yeah, so I'll tell the story of how this all came to be. So kind of a funny one, right, is Torc, for lack of a better way to say it, we're East Coast, we're here in the mountains of Virginia. We're not the flashiest of companies. The fact that occasionally people here wear polos is dressed up, right? That's sort of our style here and always has been. When Daimler first reached out, we didn't know exactly how are we going to mesh culturally. Are they more kind of fancy, high end? Are they, where are they going to sit? And they showed up in hoodies and boots. And we're like, all right, these two guys that first showed up are our kind of people. One of those two was Axel Gurn, who now leads up the Stuttgart office, the Torc EU side. So one of them obviously has continued to join us. And we had an initial meeting here in Blacksburg. We're like, all right, there's something here. And Ben Hastings and I, our CTO and I, went over to Stuttgart a couple of weeks after. And we're sitting in this conference room and trying to kind of, again, feel each other out. And if you've ever been in any kind of investment type meetings, there's always that awkward moment where somebody proposes investing, right? Especially where Torc, we weren't really actively soliciting it. We'd heard people over the years, but we weren't out on a roadshow or anything. And there's a long-standing joke now that Axel was sitting there and talking to Ben and I, and well, we could collaborate this way and we could partnership that way. And he goes up on the whiteboard and writes, "What would you think about this?" And writes the word Tormler, which is Torc and Daimler. "What would you think about this?" And Ben and I start looking at each other like, is he proposing what we think he is? Obviously, that was sort of the first of those discussions. And at the time, Ralph was the other guy in the room, and Ralph and Axel reported to Peter. And so it was right after that we got to know Peter von Schmidt, and everything starts turning. So that was sort of the inception of that discussion. And obviously, Michael and Peter and the board and all that really kind of started to form, and we joined the Daimler Truck family. It's been a really interesting partnership and collaboration because there's a lot of different roles that Daimler Truck plays. There's obviously the team in Stuttgart, several of which, like Axel, have joined Torc. We still work very closely there. So there's the kind of engineering relationship, the autonomy and self-driving development level. There's the collaboration with the great team that's out there in Portland, folks like Suman and Joanna that have been out speaking at some of the conferences in terms of what they're doing on their side, and the collaboration with the chassis. And then there's the partnership with all the customers, the folks that we collaborate with. And so all these different types of partnerships have formed between Torc and Daimler. And it's not just one big thing as them as a shareholder. It's, the engineering, it's the other engineering, it's the customer side. So it's been a really great experience. Obviously, there's challenges, right? And I think anybody that works in software and autonomy, even safety critical side and the traditional commercial vehicle development side of the house, you're always trying to figure out, how do our planning cadences and methodologies align? How do our terminology line up? And it's like, well, you think on a 3-year cycle for everything, and we can change software in a much tighter. And it's been a really amazing process of working very closely to find those mesh points. Okay, you don't care how quick we turn here. You care when we need to change a requirement on a vehicle. But that takes 3 years, so you better not do that often, right? And really meshing that. But where we are 100% aligned is around our views on safety. And that has been true from day one, is that both sides have always been committed to, let's develop this thing from day one with safety in mind. We owe the industry, we owe the public at large the trust that by the time we get to taking a driver out, we've done everything the right way, right? That we have looked at this from a safety perspective, that we have analyzed every way we could what it means to be safe enough. And that's something that from day one, there was never any disagreement on, and was always very much in lockstep, that if Torc's going to achieve our mission of saving lives, if Daimler's going to continue to be the leader in this space, we owe that to the customers, to our partners, and to the U.S. economy at large to do that the right way.
Like this, done it the right way. And the public is, if you want to use, let's just say they're going from Charlottesville and they're cruising down to Virginia Beach, and they go by one of your trucks, and there's a mom and a dad, and the truck says Torc Daimler on the side. They know that there's trust, that you did it right, that Torc is not cutting corners, and that's going to help build that trust as you go to scale. Because if the mom and the dad that are driving that vehicle know that Torc did this the safe way, you're building a lot of really good public trust there.
Yeah, for sure. Look, and I'll put two things. One, obviously, publicly, we haven't put hard requirements and timelines. We will be driver out by this date. Look, been in this industry long enough to know that there's been a lot of those promises that haven't been kept. And so for us, again, it's going to be when it's safe. The second aspect, and even on a more personal note, right? I have my little boy turned 4 last week, and I would want to ensure that I would feel perfectly fine with my wife and son driving next to one of these trucks. And that's the bar, right? And that's the thing that we want to set at. And so I think that's, when you put it in a very personal perspective, it makes you realize what it's going to take to get this driver out.
I like that approach. I give Torc a lot of credit. He didn't fall into the Paul Bunyan and the tall tales that we all heard as kids in this industry seem to adopt them and tell these tales. And in my opinion, it's a trail of broken promises. But Torc said, no, we're going to do this when this is safe. I like that. What are your thoughts on the boom and bust of the hype cycles in autonomy?
We've lived through 2 of them. We've kept true to who we were. I think it's tough, right? It's an industry where we need a lot of capital any company needs a lot of capital to do this development, right? It is an extremely challenging problem and one that you can very quickly get overwhelmed with opportunity. Michael Fleming, always reminded us more companies die of indigestion than starvation, right? And so we always wanted to be very mindful about how much we thought we needed and how much we wanted to take on. So I think that's one, is that you get people that are very excited about robotaxi and trucks and first and last mile delivery in 6 different regions. It's really hard to be successful that way. And something that I think we've avoided doing. We've always been very tight with where we wanted to focus our time, our energy, and really our most precious resource, which is our people, right? I think that's part of it. When you really think through the lessons learned over the years, that ability to stay focused and manage that cash. Again, we had a lot of times where we were thinking about how we're making payroll, right? You get a little tighter with what you think you need versus what you really want. The other aspect is having someone like Daimler. They are, for lack of a better word, they're in it for the long haul, right? They have a saying of, lead with the long view. And so I think this is one where if you're looking for short exits and quick capital, self-driving, and more importantly, self-driving trucks isn't for you, right? It needs to be done with that longer view, with an understanding that this takes time to scale, but then also the stability that, again, I will say we owe the US freight industry, right? We owe them that we will be a long-term stable partner, right? They trust the Cascadia, they trust Daimler Truck North America and Daimler Truck to be that long-standing partner, that the service networks are going to be there, that the parts are going to be there, that they're going to stay trucking down the road with them as a partner. And that's something that Torc also views that we have to bring to the table. And so that longer view helps us avoid that hype cycle.
You don't want to be a part of the hype cycle. You're not putting out announcements of, hey, this day and this month, we're going to go drive out. This day and this month, we're going to commercialize. You're not doing that. But as I said earlier, I was going through the public filings, reading the transcripts. Peter von Schmidt recently got announced as CEO of Torc. To me, that points out that you're gearing up for commercialization. Am I reading the tea leaves right? You might not put a timeline on it, but it seems like you're laying the foundation towards commercialization.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is spot on, right? Is that next iteration of the company, right? And we've gone through several over the years already, is really starting to think about, as we're getting a bit more clear-eyed on the technology challenges, which there's still plenty of, right? Not to take that away. But we're getting more clear-eyed on where those challenges sit and how we think we're going to solve them. Commercial vehicles, when we think about launching a product and the commercialization aspects, these are work trucks, right? And so you need to think more than just technology. You need to think through, how does this fit within the US freight network, right? Most of your truckers today do not operate anything that looks like a hub-to-hub model. So, right, truckload freight is generally a regular route. It's generally pick up here, drop off there, go here, and depending on the network, get home anywhere from a week to 3 months later. That's a shift for them. So all those aspects of laying that foundation. And then you go to the other side, the parts and maintenance networks, right? Again, these things are work trucks. They go down the road and they pick up a lot of miles. So how do we start thinking about everything from parts and distribution? How do we get those? How do we service and maintain these assets? And then the one thing in the industry that's not talked about, relative to the driver shortage and driver challenges, is the technician side. Technicians are just as scarce, particularly diesel technicians these days. Some of the folks that can work on the higher end electronic systems, like the driver assistants that are now getting on there. And so we need to start thinking now, and that's some of the partnerships we have in the industry today. What is it going to take to be able to service and maintain these assets? Because at the end of the day, in addition to alleviating some of the driver pressure, is self-driving is you're talking about a high uptime, high utilization asset. And if you're breaking down, unable to maintain them, unable to service them, unable to get parts, you've broken that promise. And so we think more than just the technology, what else is it going to take to bring this product to scale?
There's a lot of pieces that are going to have to come together. And I want to read you a public statement made by Peter von Schmidt in April of 2022. Mr. von Schmidt stated the following: 3 years ago, we set out with a clear goal to commercialize level 4 autonomous trucks. Technologically, we have come a long way since. As a next step, Torc is now involving leading logistics companies to specifically develop the real-world use case of autonomous logistics systems of the future. We are on the right path, and together with our partners, we share the pioneering spirit and the willingness to succeed in autonomous trucking. Could you talk about those real-world use cases that Mr. Von Schmidt alluded to there?
One of the cool things, and obviously you've probably seen, some of the folks we've announced from our Autonomous Advisory Council, right? Folks like, Baton, who's now tied out with our friends at Ryder as well, Penske, Covenant, C.H. Robinson, Schneider, right? And there's many more, and there'll be more to come there. Those are folks that help us understand more than just the technology, more than just the truck going down the road, right? We have a whole team here that does mission control and logistics integration. The amount of complexity that goes into booking freight, getting it from point A to point B, all of the paperwork, all these other things that when you think autonomy driving down the road wouldn't cross your mind, we want to start learning and integrating that into the product now, because those are not easy fixes. Connecting up with transportation management systems and fleet management systems, right? Again, right now, in a traditional environment, you have a driver manager or dispatcher who picks up the phone half the time or has a tablet in the cab to communicate with that driver. That's not going to be there. So now what do? How do you deal with that? How do you think about launch and recovery at these endpoints for hubs? All of these other aspects that take you from cool technology, right? And I'm originally, as I say, I'm a reformed engineer, right? I was writing software at one point in time. How do you go from cool technology to meaningful, useful, scalable product? And that's a wide gap. And in freight, I would tell you it's wider than people realize because of all these other aspects that have to be figured out.
Is that what the Torc Autonomous Advisory Council is that you're getting to? I don't want to turn picking each other's brains or learning from real world experience. Is that the main role they're playing?
Yeah, a lot of that is, right. And a place for us, right? We have some folks on staff, but we're not truckers. Right? We're starting to learn a lot. And again, have some folks on the team that are truckers. But how do we learn from some of these people who have been at it for 20, 25 plus years? It would be foolish to not take that type of advice and wisdom from some of these companies who are experts at different aspects of freight, right? As I tell most of our engineers when we kind of first start onboarding them, is aside from the fact that you see a truck driving down the road, those companies may have almost nothing in common from an operations perspective. They may serve different market segments. They may organize their routes differently. They may design their networks differently. They may be entirely different businesses, and you have no idea. You just see a truck driving. And so the advisory council lets us bring those different viewpoints together, have really great dialogue. And what's amazing, everybody thinks, you're going to bring a group together and you're going to have a whole slide deck and you're going to walk them through all these concepts. We usually make it to about slide 2 before the room is just diving in on topics and thinking through everything from what does my maintenance tech need to learn to do in the future? We're talking about maintainability. And you get into these really amazing conversations where it's like, oh yeah, but we found that if you put bolts in this way, we can save 10 minutes on a maintenance cycle. And hey, this type of wire loom's better in trucking and you didn't know that, but now you do. Like all these little nuggets of, I'll say, not just information, but wisdom, right, that we can get from these folks, and we can incorporate that into the product.
And I'm assuming that they're learning just as much from you as you're learning from them.
I hope so. We try to be very transparent with them about where the challenge is. And maybe that's another Torc lesson learned of the last 15 plus years, is you don't always have to solve everything in technology, right? There may be operational ways that they deal with some of these problems today that we just don't know about, right? And so that's the other interesting one, was we can bring forward technology challenges we're having. Hey, we're trying to figure out a way to deal with this situation. They're like, oh yeah, we would never ask a driver to deal with that. We would send out call out services and have them take care of it. It's like, oh, okay, right? And so you also learn that whether you're talking about calibration or roadside recovery or a tricky on-road situation, they deal with those today. And to learn, oh, we have this technology problem. They're like, yeah, why would you solve that with software? We would solve that this way. And that back and forth is really critical to us.
I'm going to put on my economic hat here for a minute. You're getting all this information. We're seeing what's happening at the Federal Reserve. It's like you have Ben Bernanke, Greenspan, all these Federal Reserve bankers in one room that giving you all this advice. And as you go to scale, it's like, okay, to me, it seems like you're going to be able to save a lot of money because you're already going to talk about those edge cases or certain scenarios, and you're already going to have a plan in place and say, okay, implement plan A, implement plan B.
Yeah, that's the hope. And when we look at the trucking operations, the carriers that are out there, right, they know their costs and they know what drives their margins down to, the quarter cent, right? And so to be able to learn where are those drivers, and as we think about commercializing this autonomous, trucking system, right, not just one truck, but at scale with mission control and all these other aspects, understanding what it's going to take and where those financial benefits, or in some cases, additional costs come in, right? And there's always this magic of trying to balance that equation, looking at driver wages, looking at insurance costs, looking at what does it mean to have a hub when you normally did dock to dock. So now you have two stops. What does that look like, and how does that impact? And some of them have been doing their own studies and things that they can bring to the table, or are running pilots that inform, might not be even involving autonomy, but they're looking at truckload through transfer terminals. Or we can look at the LTL or the parcel business and understand how do they think about usage of a terminal, first and final mile, right? There's all these little nuggets because autonomy doesn't look like just one thing, right? And so we try to pull all these little nuggets from the industry to understand those aspects and how they impact cost and efficiency and all these other elements of the supply chain.
When I look at the supply chain and I think about hub to hub, and we're seeing a lot of this movement now, Gaddix doing it with dark warehouses, perhaps the hub could be put in a strategic location that could serve as a dark warehouse for a large retailer that can hold overflow there. You start to optimize the store's supply chain. That's really interesting. When you differentiate in the marketplace, is it the hub to hub, or what is it when you meet with a potential customer that says, this is the Torc difference?
Interestingly enough, you talk about the big shift to trucking. I think at its surface, we all the big players in this industry have seen that a hub to hub type model, again, is not novel in and of itself. Where I think there's the big differentiators, right, is it does come down to cost and total cost of ownership or total cost of operation, right? Is truly understanding those drivers. And they're much deeper than kind of the initial Excel math would tell you, right? Everybody loves doing a driver costs this, I take a driver out, look at all this cash. But you need to dig deeper, right? And you need to understand what is going to impact my uptime and my asset utilization. How might this impact fuel economy? What can I do to better optimize throughput at these endpoints and keep my first and final more effective? So you kind of got to dig deeper and really understand what the differentiating factors could be. And then, obviously not to get into anything too proprietary, but it's how do we optimize for those? How do we give the fleets the knobs and controls to optimize for those? And for us, there's lessons learned. Again, we talk about some of our previous experiences at Torc, lessons learned from the work we've done with Caterpillar over the years and autonomous trucks and open pit mines, being able to see a more predictable element of your movement of goods, having more predictive maintenance and understanding what is the impact there. And if you have more predictive maintenance and you have the ability to tie very closely with the OE and understand what's exactly going on with that chassis, you're able to increase that preventative maintenance and reduce unplanned downtime. So I'd love to say there's one magic knob that makes this whole equation work. It is so many little ones, but it's actually having the understanding to know how we can affect those. What is the data we can use to help inform better decisions in that place?
What drove the clear understanding of finance and economics? You bootstrapped from the beginning. You're understanding economics and finance now. Was that in the founding blood of the company, say we're going to be financially disciplined and financially smart?
As a bunch of engineers, we probably weren't all that great at it at the beginning. We had some great team members early on that really helped instill that. And then, one of my favorite things when we talk about what's been different in the last 3 years since joining the Daimler side has been the ability to grow and scale and add new perspectives into the company. And so the folks that we have on the finance side, on product management, on strategy that have these different backgrounds, really from the freight industry finance, really help drive that into the company, right? And people that have, stared at a trucking company's balance sheet and understood, okay, you don't realize, but you're about to have to think through repaving that parking lot every 3 years because trucks are hard on asphalt, right? And driving those costs in. So we think about them every single day when we think about how do we design this product, and the product is more than just the self-driving truck.
It's become very clear that yourself and the entire Torc team clearly understands autonomous trucking. You understand all the nuances that go around with it. And in your opinion, Andrew, what is the future of autonomous trucking?
Yeah, I'll clarify that first one. Is I don't think we can ever stop understanding it. While we've learned a lot, every customer meeting, every time I go out to Albuquerque and chat with one of our drivers, I learn something else. And I think that mentality here at Torc is really one of our advantages. We never think we know everything. So that's maybe step one there. When we think about the future of autonomous trucking, I think we as an industry, and I mean both and I'll speak broadly, both the autonomy, the OEs, the carriers, the brokerage, the shippers, you name it, this whole ecosystem has a lot of learning to do together, right? And we shouldn't ever think that one of us can do this on our own, that you don't need this amazing set of partners and to build this ecosystem up together. And so I think from our view, it's going to be that continued understanding of how can this, and again, technology transition to a product, right? How does this truly fit this massively complicated world that is freight movement and logistics and supply chain? And doing that in a meaningful way together is going to take all of us. And when you see the folks we have on the advisory council, like I said, more announcements to come there, you really start to understand that it takes a lot of pieces and parts. And if any one of us tries to move too far without the other, without that trust of each other, I don't think we're going to see this industry succeed, or certainly won't see it succeed and scale as fast as it could, if we really were thoughtful and mindful about who we bring on board and how, and kind of bring that ecosystem together.
You're doing it right, and always learning philosophy is one I subscribe to. I'm a book nerd, and I love to read books, and I go on topics and read more and more books. So I always subscribe to the always learning philosophy. It's very happy to hear that your Torc is taking, I'll use the word, a grounded approach. You're taking a real world grounded approach to autonomy. And as we look to wrap up this insightful conversation, what would you like our listeners to take away with them today?
I think you've hit on a lot of those key points. We've been at this for a while. We've learned our lessons, the good and the bad, over all those years. Really today, I can't be more proud of Torc as an organization. We're kind of entering this next phase, as you said, with Michael Fleming continuing on as a board member, Peter von Schmidt coming in. We have some amazing new additions to the team, and really have this great group here at Torc that I think is setting the stage to bring this product from technology really to something meaningful in the market. And maybe the biggest thing I can put out there is we want to do it while building trust, right? And that's trust with not only the shippers and the carriers, but the truckers that are out on the road with us today, with an understanding of how this is going to impact jobs in the trucking market in the future, which we think there is never going to be a shortage of, right? How does this impact regular road users, the regulatory folks, all these other people? And maybe that's the olive branch here, is we want to continue to have those discussions to build that trust and prove to people we're doing it the right way.
You are doing it the right way, because without public trust, there is no autonomous industry. It doesn't happen. It all revolves around public trust. And as Torc enters the next phase, I'll say this from having known you guys for several years, it's going to be exciting. I can't wait to see what you unveil next, because the future is bright, the future is autonomous, and the future is Torc. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on the road to autonomy today.
Hey, thanks for having me, and hopefully get back sometime soon.
Thank you for listening to the Road to Autonomy podcast. If you've enjoyed listening, please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Want to get in touch? Follow us on Twitter @Road to Autonomy, or email podcast@brulteco.com. The Road to Autonomy is produced by Brulte & Company. The views and opinions expressed on the Road to Autonomy podcast do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of Brulte & Company. The content discussed on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be taken as legal, tax, investment, or business advice.